Hello there, and welcome to another audio version of the blog Off Grid and Entertaining in Portugal. I'm sitting here in the sun and the heat in the valley with some great news. We have planted the vineyard. That is the subject and the title of this dispatch. 1,000 plants and a lot of logistics, but they're in the ground. For the best part of 6 years, a crazy combination of ambition, naivety, misplaced confidence and pig-headed determination has created Vale das Estrelas. It's living proof that ridiculous ideas which might just work can actually work. And continuing the theme of doing something which creates far more work than we actually have time to spend, and so utterly outside our comfort zone it shouldn't really be possible, we have planted a vineyard. Just a small one, but if you've ever planted 1,000 grapevines by hand, you'll know it's not that small, and we've been doing it all against the clock. The only remaining memory of the wet winter is the lush greenery taking over the valley, and the flowers now springing into life. The beautiful white and yellow esteva rock rose blooms are bursting out across the hillsides of Alentejo as the race is on to get the good plants in and the bad plants out before everything gets a lot harder. Summer arrived this week with temperatures in the mid-20s Celsius, and working outside in the middle of the day started getting uncomfortable again. The weeds, which used to easily just lift up out of the gravel paths, are now set in stone, as the soaked clay soil is turning to concrete, and muddy cars become dusty cars. At least the vines are in, and a few trees and shrubs alongside them. Hopefully, a few more of the plants and bushes we've been buying will be in the ground over the next few days, when the attention will turn to cutting back brush to abide by fire prevention laws. Planting a vineyard, it turns out, requires a lot of planning and persuading people with machines to get a series of things happening on time and in order. In the background was always the question of could we afford the time and money of another project, versus could we afford not to convert the dusty big space behind the houses into something beautiful, the first thing people see as they arrive at the Valley of the Stars. We always planned to plant a vineyard of Portuguese grapes, not because we know what we're doing, but because we like to learn and to tell the story. I'd had high hopes for a field blend, a traditional Portuguese insurance policy mix of many different grapes all harvested together, when most are ripe and ready, and only a few are either green or are raisins. But over the last couple of years, continuing our wine journey through Alentejo, we've been seeking advice from all sides, and after deciding this would be the year to do it, the stalking of anyone who would still pick up the phone has only intensified. We have been worrying winemakers in the way stray dogs worry sheep. But that's not all. We've been annoying oenologists, vexing viticulturalists, aggravating agriculturalists, irritating irrigation experts, and getting on grape growers' nerves. We've really stretched friendly advice to its limits. We've asked everyone what we should do, at least twice, and have been sending a barrage of texts and videos. Is this how we should water the plants? I whined. Is it too much water? Is it not enough? Did they go in early enough? Did they go in too late? Will they sprout? They're not sprouting. Are they dead? Maybe they're still sleeping. And that's just been the last week of worries for a would-be winemaker. It all started much earlier with a few friends and friends of friends in the know and in the business dropping by to advise us how to grow the best grapes and make the best wine from our cleared eucalyptus forest. The patch of fast-growing, soil-poisoning, water-hungry monocrop on our land wasn't well maintained, and so one of the first things we did was cut the whole forest down to make way for the new houses. Once Leonelli the chainsaw man had flattened the forest for free and sliced the wood up into half-metre lengths to sell to bakers, we brought in a bulldozer to dig out the roots, and then another one to cut a trench around the perimeter and bury them. We pondered the standing water in the winters, tested the soil, checked the profile, and realised we had about 40 centimetres of nutrient-starved soil atop a thick layer of solid clay. It was such a hard layer that the pine trees, which had managed to find enough light to compete with the eucalyptus, had roots growing sideways rather than down, which is why they toppled over in the winter winds. It was established early on that we would have to break the clay crust to give the grapes a good chance to grow down and tap into the water, which would be retained through the heat of summer in the clay. Planting a vineyard isn't rocket science, it's farming. Sadly, I'm neither a rocket scientist or a farmer. Winemaking starts in the field, we were told. In our case, a large flat one of about half a hectare. It's always been my job and my approach to this crazy new life to gather information from all possible sides and then either write up the story or implement the findings. But sometimes gathering too much information from too many people can hamper decision-making by flooding the zone, to quote a phrase. At the end of it all, we had to make the big decisions. Which varieties? How far apart? How would they be guided to grow? How would they be irrigated? The winemaking stuff, we've been assured, isn't something to worry about for at least a few years. We are hugely grateful to everyone who's advised us and apologise here and now to Hamilton Reich, Mauro Azoya, Miguel Mimoso, Anna Rita Busa, Niels Olmers, Carsten Jensen, Dorina and Louisa Lindemann, and the many others involved in the making of this movie for either not doing what they said or not doing it well enough. And in my defence, everyone I asked had a slightly different idea of what we should do. We leaned heavily on Hamilton, the famous Mouchau winemaker with his own wonderful Natas Vini winery, who planted not just his own vineyard recently, but also many hectares of the grapes growing in our vicinity over the past 20 years. And on speed dial was Patient Mauro of Porta Seiche fame, but also a wonderful small production winemaker at Velvet Boutique and Artisans Terroir, who creates our own label wine, while we wait for our new guys to get producing. The first big decision was the grape varieties, whittled down to just 3. Castelao for the red, and Orinto and Alvarinho in the white. The field isn't square, and amid a confusion of measurements and drone photographs, I left the geometry to ChatGPT, which advised 800 grapes would be sufficient. Once we ploughed and were prepping to plant by putting wooden posts in and pulling long lengths of wire across marked with tape 1.5 metres apart, the distance between each of the plants, we realised it was nearer 1,000, and so upped our order from Castelao to 600, settling on 200 for each of the 2 whites. The delivery of 1,000 grapevines was much more straightforward than I expected. It was a lot easier than receiving 25 tonnes of compost in a 16-metre truck, finding a bulldozer with a big enough ripper to cut deep through the clay, and much easier than planting 1,000 grapevines. Like many of the busy delivery people who buzz up and down this coast, the woman delivering Plancels plants wanted to meet at the local petrol station rather than venturing into our valley. I didn't even need to hitch up the trailer. They came tightly packed and chilled in 5 small boxes. Of course, that was just the last part of the puzzle. First of all, our local cow king farmer, Antonio Oreiras Vacas Oliveira, and his fabulously helpful son Gonzalo, had to plough, distribute the organic material and plough again, all amid a much-changing weather forecast. Once the ripper did its work, cutting through the clay in a day, it was over to us. To Krishna and Jose, and with friends and guests Andrew Major and Howard Fennick, Joanna Hutchins and Paul McGibney. It all took a lot longer than we expected. The grapes languished in bathtubs, with their roots dangling in the water until we were ready for each bundle of them, and 5 days after arriving, all the plants were in the ground. Rather than providing the vines with the usual wire trellis, we favoured bush vine, as they call it in South Africa, each plant clinging to its own bamboo stick and growing individually into a little bush. Local irrigation expert and general good egg, Cristiano, taught us how best to run the water pipes and gave me a shopping list which he and his brother turned into a working irrigation system in a couple of hours. Automation will come soon, but for now the grapes have been given a good soaking, forcing the air bubbles away from the roots, which everyone tells us is important. Now we wait. We hold our nerve and don't give them too much water, so they learn to grow deep roots down through the clay looking for water. Let's hope the plants wake up soon and like their new home. As usual, there's loads of photos online and little video clips of us doing the planting of the vineyard. Just go to Off-Grid and Entertaining in Portugal to find those. You can also listen to the story of how our grapevines were grafted and created in the third episode of our podcast series, Anna and Al's Big Portuguese Wine Adventure, which you can find in all the usual podcast places or on our blog, The Big Portuguese Wine Adventure. And that is a place where I'm going to go into much more detail. So if you're a wine nerd, if you're interested in making a vineyard, I'll be going into a lot more detail over on that blog site, looking at the materials we're using, how we're all doing it. So please go to the website, sign up for that one, have a listen, and hopefully we'll keep you in touch with the progress. Oh, two things I've forgotten to mention. If you want to escape into the country, get away from it all, and you're not too far away, come and check out our vineyard next weekend, around April the 25th. That's the celebrations here in Odemira, commemorating Portugal's 1974 Carnation Revolution. It is a thing to behold. Arts, music, it's fantastic. So come and see us. And also, last chance, 2 tickets left, wine retreat in May the 7th, Thursday the 7th of May, Monday the 11th of May, with the Hutchins Wine Academy. Please sign up, get those last 2 tickets. It's going to be exciting. We did an Easter Sunday lunch, final dress rehearsal of the wine pairing menu, and it went down a storm, I can tell you that. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.